Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
The life support system was on your back.
On your back.
And if it broke, you were dead instantly.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon.
In October of 1957, Sputnik was launched. And to me, that was the beginning of the space age. And the space race began shortly after that. Well, I got to Germany in '59, and in '61, Yuri Gagarin was the first human being in space. Shortly thereafter, Alan Shepard became the first American. Then just shortly after that, President Kennedy announced the Apollo program, that we were going to go to the moon and land on the moon by the end of 1969. Well, I thought it was crazy idea, but turned out 8 years and 2 months later, I'm sitting in mission control and on Apollo 11 and talking to Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin when they landed on the moon. So 8 years and 2 months later, we accomplished the goal. I had a little picture of my family, a little snapshot. And I left it up on the moon, and everybody, the whole family was so excited about that. On the back that we had written, I had written, this is the family of astronaut Charlie Duke from planet Earth who landed on the moon in April 1972, and we all signed it. I dropped it on the moon, took a picture. First, I was working following the development of the Saturn rocket, which was an amazing machine. Still is, I think, biggest one ever launched, rocket ever launched. And so then I got support crew for Apollo 10, and I was mission control for that. There was mission control for Apollo 11, backup on Apollo 13. Flew to the moon on Apollo 16 and back up for Apollo 17. So I've worked on more Apollo missions individually than anybody else in the astronaut office. 5 I were associated with. And, only flew once though.
Yes, my name is Dorothy Duke, and I'm married to the astronaut Charlie Duke. And we've been married now 61 years. And we've had a lot of ups and downs, but we applaud and thank the Lord for getting us this far. And it's been an interesting adventure being married to Charlie, as you can imagine.
I grew up in a small town in South Carolina. This was during World War II. I'm 88 years old right now, so I remember Pearl Harbor. And my dad served in the Navy. I wasn't in combat, but he served in the Navy. And when he got back after the war, I fell in love with the Navy and his generation of service, and so I decided to go to the Naval Academy. I graduated from the Naval Academy in 1957, and at the time there was no Air Force Academy, and I fell in love with airplanes, and I could volunteer for the Air Force. And so I did that, and I went into the Air Force upon graduation in 1957, became a pilot, and within a couple of years, by 1959, I was headed to Germany, my first squadron. And that year, NASA was formed, and the first group of astronauts were formed.
So he applied for test pilot school in California. saying he wanted to get back to flying. So we moved to California, and I found out there that he loves airplanes. He was more excited about that than he was excited about our marriage. And I just started feeling like I'm moving down to the bottom of the list. I'm not first in his life. In fact, before we got married, I told him, I said, I'm going to put you first in my life, and will you put me first in your life? And he said he would. So that's what I did. I put him first in my life, but I wasn't first in his. And so I felt alone. I felt rejected. I just was really struggling a lot through that. And I keep thinking, well, when we move again, when we move away from all these airplanes and test pilot school, then we can work on our marriage, and then things will get better. But then, of course, he starts the astronaut program, and he's gone a lot of the time, a lot of the time. And so then I thought, well, okay, it's a good program. It's good he's in it. I'm all for it. And so I want to support him through all this, so I won't bug him anymore about our relationship. And so when he gets back from the moon, then we can work on our marriage. So that was what I thought.
Dottie was excited about leaving California. Edwards Air Force Base, where the test pilot school is in the middle of the Mojave Desert. And it's desert. You know, we drove 35 miles to go to a big department store. We drive 30 miles to go to church on Sunday. We drive 110 miles just to have dinner down in Los Angeles. She was happy to get out of the desert to get back to trees and grass and you know, those kind of things. And and plus it was halfway across the country, almost halfway home for her in Georgia. So after the war was over, we moved to, my parents moved to Lancaster, South Carolina, which is up in the upstate, and small town, 7,000 to 8,000 people. And there it was the beginning of the space age, the jet age. So I'd look up and I'd see these white contrails go over. The jets were making the contrails in the upper atmosphere. And that was the beginning of a love for aviation. I didn't get to fly, but I fell in love with hopefully one day making a contrail. And so when I got to the Naval Academy, as I said earlier, there was they taught us, they didn't teach us to fly, but they gave us some exposure to aviation. And I got really absorbed in flying and wanted to be a pilot.
Well, my dream was just oriented towards the man I was going to marry. We had a lot of movies then, and it was so many movies of happily ever after that was really what my dream was, that I would grow up and I'd get married and live happily ever after and be married. I don't know if you know the fairy tale Cinderella or not.
Yes.
You are familiar with Cinderella, yes. Well, that was what I was. I was Cinderella looking for Prince Charming.
Primary motivation, I think, was the Air Force said, we really want you to go to graduate school. It'll be great for your career. And so I listened to them, and I decided to follow their advice, even though I was giving up a great, exciting job. But going back to school wasn't really a great, exciting job. It turned out to be very, very difficult. I'd been out of school for 5 years, and electrical engineering had passed me by, and aerodynamics had passed me by, and all of the things that I had to catch up on. I couldn't do a calculus problem. I couldn't do anything. But I caught up and ended up graduating.
Yes. When I met Charlie, then he just seemed so special. He seemed to just love me so much, and he was in school. We were in Massachusetts then. I'm from the South and he's from the South. And he was there getting his graduate degree from MIT. and I was up there just wanting to go to another part of the country and have some adventure. And so we met there, and he just wowed me, and he was very anxious to get married right away. I really wasn't interested in getting married so soon. I wanted to grow up a little bit more. I just finished college and university, so I kind of wanted to see the world. But he convinced me that yes, that he was the right one, and so we got married.
Well, in 1962, I rotated back to the States. The Air Force sent me to graduate school at MIT. While I was there, I was working on the Apollo guidance and navigation system that MIT had the contract to build. And we were taking data to make sure the system was operational. And we did, and the system worked perfectly, and we proved that it was easy to operate in an operational setting. So I got my degree, and I met some astronauts while I was there working on this system, and they were very excited, enthusiastic. I'd never met anybody that was so excited about their job. And I asked, how did I get that job? And they laughed and said, well, you need to get your degree and go to test pilot school, and you might have a chance. So I followed their advice. Got accepted to test pilot school in 64, graduated in 65, stayed on as an instructor at the test pilot school. And in September of 65, there was an article in the paper that NASA's looking for more astronauts. And so I applied and was selected in April of 1966. So we moved to Houston, and I started my 10-year career as an astronaut in 1966.
But he had to study because he was in school. He wasn't doing well at that time, and so the pressure was on him. So we'd eat dinner, and he'd go to his room, and he'd start studying, close the door and start studying. And I thought, where is this guy that I thought I had married? So it kind of continued like that for a while. And I thought, well, once he finishes school, then we can really have that relationship again. But then he went to test pilot school. Now, see, I had no idea he was interested in being an astronaut because he didn't when we got married.
An excitement for me, or for her, to have a husband that was so excited about the job that he was going to do. Well, I grew up doing, in my memory, as I said, I was 6 years old when Pearl Harbor came. And my dad went off to the Navy. We went to live with my grandmother after about a year in a small town in South Carolina. So I can remember the hardships of World War II, the rationing, no gasoline. Fortunately, we lived on my grandmother's farm, and she had animals, so we could milk the cows and churn the butter and learn how to just live off the land, if you will. And that's my memories of being very patriotic and in support of the war in any way a 6 to 8 year old could do. So we collected tinfoil, we collected items like bottles and plastics and stuff like that. We turned them in, and so that was our contribution to the war, was the support of the rationed items and not wasting anything. So I learned to be very frugal, and I had a twin brother and a first cousin. We were all the same age. So the three of us grew up in this, for 2 years in this very small town. And so I can remember the train track went behind my grandmother's house, and the troop trains carrying soldiers back and forth between the military bases. We'd go down and wave, and they'd wave back. So my heroes really became the soldiers, sailors, and airmen of World War II. And I respected them so much, and they were so sacrificial in their service. But we were determined.
We met through a mutual friend. I was actually staying at a friend's house that she was renting, that I had known back at the university where I graduated. She graduated before me, and Charlie had met them because he was actually moving into the place that they lived, because they were moving out, and he and his friend were looking for a place to live. So it was just the second day I was there. I was been looking for a job, and he came over to talk to them, and I was there and talked to him. And he said, he'd get in touch with me when he got back, and I thought, well, that's nice. He's a little older. It'd be like a big brother. It'd be nice to have someone take me around. And but he went home and told his mother he had met the girl he was going to marry. Wow. So I didn't know that. But he started talking serious pretty fast. And so that was in September, and by Christmas we were engaged.
Yeah. 4 of us military bachelors lived in my class. And we didn't like the graduate house where we were staying. It was just a room. It was more like living in a hotel, a very low-class hotel, I should say. So we were looking for an apartment, and we had met these girls who were living in an apartment, found out that they were going to move out at the end of the summer, and we could move in. So we rented this place, and so this was in August, I guess, right after summer school. And roommate and I went over there, and these girls were from the University of North Carolina, and they had a visitor named Dottie, who was a graduate of University of North Carolina, and she was there visiting and staying with them till she found a job and found an apartment. So we got there one evening, and I wanted to meet this new girl. So we sort of sat there, and finally she came out from the back. She'd been looking for a job all day long, and so she was tired, but I wasn't going to leave till she came out. So anyway, she came out, and I met her, and we talked about an hour. Then the next morning, I went home. I drove back to South Carolina, and I told my mom, Mom, I have met the girl I was going to marry.
I guess he just felt like, in himself that this was the right person. He was 27 at this time, and had dated a lot of people, and so we just seemed to have a lot in common.
A feeling of oneness there, I guess, and and you just end up knowing that there's something special about this relationship. And that 5 minute conversation, a 30-minute conversation, did it. It was I just knew that she was the one. And so this was September. We started dating, and by November we were engaged unofficially. But we got officially, after I asked her parents, could I marry her? They said yes. We got officially engaged in Christmas of 1962, and we were married the next June. So we've been now married 61 years.
Wow.
And I think we're going to survive.
Well, so after that, we go on the honeymoon. And this guy that had been courting me so much and talking and just spending all this time with me, suddenly it seemed to me like he could just check the thing, and say, okay, we're married now, so now I can move on to do other things. Where in my mind, it was, we just got married, we're just beginning a new life together.
After a long delay in between Apollo 14 and Apollo 15 and 16, we landed in the Descartes Highlands. By this time we had a spacecraft that lasted for 3 days on the moon instead of 1 day, and we had a car they called the Lunar Rover that we took with us, and which revolutionized lunar exploration. And we were the only mission that landed in the mountain. I call it the mountains of the moon. As you look at the moon, there's the dark areas and the light areas. The light areas are the highlands, or the mountains. And so we landed almost on the equator, east of 00 latitude, longitude, and in the Descartes Highlands, it was called. And so if you imagine Apollo 11 at sea level, we landed at about 2,500 meters above that. So we were in I'd say they call it the mountains of the moon. Didn't look like mountains because we were up on the top of them.
A little bit closer. Okay, here we go, a big one. Off the ground, on the floor. There we go. Good. And
the rover was working, so the exploration of our flight went very, very well. And we collected the biggest rock ever picked up on the moon. We didn't want to pick it up, but they said pick it up, so we obeyed. And I mean, this is like a big, I don't know, you have watermelons in Vietnam, but this thing is like a baby in your arms. And when we got back down, it weighed 20 pounds. Well, up on the moon, it weighed 3 pounds. And so, but it was so big, I had to roll it up my leg and cradle it in my arm as like this. And as I walked back to the lunar module with this big rock, we argued with them. We don't want to pick up that big rock. Yeah, pick it up. So we obeyed, and very exciting and very dynamic and very stressful 3 days, if you will. You had so much to do, and you wanted to make sure you did it right. Hopefully things didn't break, and so fortunately the car worked well, and so we were able to drive a total of about, not quite 25 kilometers across the moon. And so we accomplished our goals, and 3 days later we left and started home.
Difficult for me to put my feelings into words right now. We've seen so much and done so much in the last 11 days. It's almost indescribable, the views and the scenes you see. You don't think that that one can be topped, and then sure enough, the next one tops it. Just
most clearest in my mind is the entry right now, and that's hard to top. It's going to be a while to digest everything that has happened, but I, along with John, would like to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to the 4 groups of people that he mentioned. Thank you again, everyone. It's good to be back, and we'll be looking forward to seeing everyone again. Thank you.
My mind had gone from moon to money, maybe money. I had no peace.
So I tried a job. I became a travel agent. I went on a trip, but you don't get love from that. And I tried reading other philosophies. I tried a lot of church work. I tried just lots of different things, looking for the answer to life. And none of them were giving me the answer I wanted, which was love and really a purpose in life. And so that's when I considered suicide. Wow. This was about three years after he had gotten back from the moon.
It was difficult. I was 36, the youngest that walked on the moon. And after Apollo was over, 6 months later, 8 months later, let me say, I was working on Space Shuttle, and it was, I was, 36, 37, and I was at the top of my career, and the top of the ladder, and the thought occurred to me, what are you going to do now? How are you going to top a flight to the moon? So I became frustrated, if you will. We had 2 boys at the time. Our marriage was in trouble. Dottie was very depressed. In fact, had suicidal thoughts because our marriage wasn't going like she thought it should go, and so she began to get depressed, and so she even considered suicide.
So then he comes back from the moon, and he's still this workaholic type person. He gets on the backup plan for Apollo 17, and he's just now thinking about another career and all this. And I didn't feel that important in his life. And so I became very depressed, and so depressed that I became, first I thought, I'll divorce him. Now I'll find somebody that will love me the way I want to be loved. That was what I was looking for. Somebody to love me the way that I wanted to love them to love me. And so I thought about that, and then this was probably the Lord too, put in my mind, maybe there isn't a man that can love you the way you want to be loved. If there's not. And so I thought, then if there's not, then what is the answer to life? Because I thought the answer to life for me was a happy marriage. And so I started a search. And it's kind of in the Bible, in Ecclesiastes, the search that you make for what is the purpose of life. Why am I here? I'm only going to live so many years and then be gone. So what is it?
Well, we were in a church, but we weren't believers. By believers, I mean having Jesus in your heart and not just in your mind. And so some people came to our church one weekend, and they had a joy and a peace about them, and it was just contagious. And Dottie looked at them, and I went home after that weekend and said, I've tried everything but Jesus. And she said, Jesus, if you're real, come into my life. If you're not, I want to die.
So I prayed that weekend after hearing all these stories, and I said, God, I don't know if you're real. Jesus, I don't know if you're the Son of God, but I made a mess of my life, and I knew that. I made a mess of my life, and if you are real, then I give you my life. And if you're not real, then I'll kill myself. So
I guess the salvation of our marriage is that understanding of the power of forgiveness, the power of love. Love overcomes a lot, and so we try to live out that God's love reflected in us to our spouses. And I was very successful in business, but I wasn't happy, wasn't having no peace.
And actually, by that point in my life, I'd come to doubt that he was no God at all. That maybe God doesn't even exist. And so the life is a joke, a sick joke.
I've been in church all my life. I can remember going to church as a little boy, but it was here and not here. And your head, not heart.
Lonely, and why live any longer? Life is just miserable, and there's no purpose in it, and nothing's good about it. So that was the way I thought. But these people came to our church and said, "Well, Jesus changed my life." And I thought, okay, how, and they would answer, like one had been an alcoholic, and then the Lord had helped him become not an alcoholic anymore. And then they talked about their prayers were answered and all these things. And I thought, well, gosh, I've tried everything to find the answer to life. I'd gone through really 5 different things. One was the party life, which, of course, left me totally empty. And after going through those 5 things, I thought I had not tried Jesus. And so I thought, well, I don't know if these people are telling me the truth or not, but I'm willing to give it a try.
And while I hadn't changed, she had changed. And her focus went off of me to God and to let Jesus be in charge. And so that gave her a lot of peace.
So that was my prayer on a Saturday night. So the next morning on a Sunday, I really didn't know. Well, I just started thinking that, well, if he's real and he answered them in their prayers, then I'll pray to him and see if he'll answer me. If he's real, he should be answering me too, like he did then. So I began to pray. That's how it started. I started praying just to find out if Jesus was really real, God was real. And so I'd pray about something very small, and really I don't remember all those things, which is probably good, exactly what they were, but it would be something like, oh, I need to talk to such and such. And then the phone would ring about 5 minutes later, and it was such and such on the phone. There were a lot of things like that. And so, of course, I said, oh, that's coincidence. Oh, that's just luck. And I said that for a month, really for a whole month. All these little things kept happening like that. And after a month, I thought, you don't have that much coincidence. You don't have that much luck. And so I realized he really is real. He really is. And at that point, I was just so thrilled.
So she was just at peace and had forgiven me for everything that I had done wrong. And forgiveness is so important in relationships. And back to Scripture, the Bible teaches that it says, do not let the sun go down on your anger. If you're angry with your spouse, settle it before you go to sleep. And that's forgiveness. And Jesus forgave us for all of our sins, and we're to forgive one another.
When I say the Lord spoke to me, I mean he put the thought in my mind. I've never heard him audibly, but he put the thought in my mind. So the thought in my mind is that, Dorothy, you were born again. Well, I knew that was in the Bible. We never talked about it at church, but he said, you were born again. I have forgiven you for everything you've done wrong in the past. And I understood that because I knew about Jesus dying on the cross. And that, so your past life's behind you and you're starting a brand new life. And I thought, wow, all that bad life that I've had, that I felt, all my life is gone. I don't have to look back anymore. I can start brand new with Jesus right now, brand new. It just gave me so much hope and so much joy to know I could just lay that down and move on and start life over again with the Lord. So then I started talking to the Lord about Charlie and our marriage. And so then the Lord spoke to my mind again, and he said, if you want a born-again marriage, then you must forgive Charlie the same way I have forgiven you.
So I was listening to these scriptures, and one stuck out was Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to God except through me. Now, that's either true or a lie. And we get to decide. I get to decide.
We went to church and stuff, but I didn't bug him at all because I was just focused. It was kind of a one focus, love Charlie. That was the only assignment the Lord gave me, to love Charlie. So God was going to take care of the other things. So we focused on that. And then 2.5 years later, Charlie goes to the Bible study and he comes to the Lord and surprises me.
Wow.
Shocked me. So I had a little argument with the Lord, which is okay. But I had an argument with him. I said, well, first of all, Charlie's never said he's sorry. He thinks he's perfect, and he's never apologized for anything. And so then the Lord put a scripture in my mind from the Bible. And the scripture says, those that say, Lord, Lord, call me Lord, Lord, but don't obey me, then they're hypocrites. That's a paraphrase of mine. That's not really what the Bible says, but it's like that. They're not true. And so I thought, yes, I call him Lord. How can I call him Lord and not obey him? I mean, if he's my Lord, you obey. And so I turned to him and said, okay, Lord, I'll forgive him, but you help me.
I made the choice after that weekend that Jesus was the Son of God. I said, Lord, come into my life. And sitting in my automobile, right after that Bible study, when I said that, the peace of God entered my own life. And I had never had an experience like that.
In the United States and maybe in Vietnam too, we would have in school, we'd have a big blackboard and you'd use chalk and you'd write on the blackboard. Okay, he showed me that when I forgave Charlie, first of all, I'd written all these things on the blackboard that I remembered that he had done or hadn't done. They were all written there. And so when I agreed to forgive, then I felt Jesus' hand on my hand on the eraser. And so together we were erasing all these things I'd written on the blackboard. And then also at the very end, like in school, we got a rag and got it wet. And then we washed the blackboard. So there was any speck of chalk on the blackboard anymore. It was gone. So when I would remember something, Jesus would say to me, he said, no, you can't remember. Remember, it's not there on the blackboard anymore. It's not there anymore. It's gone. So you can't remember what happened in the past. Well, wait till you see what a fantastic life you're going to have, I guess. Stick with it.
Yeah.
What I say today?
Yeah. For that 61 years of amazing.
Oh, well, I just say 61 years. I said, Lord, I can't believe we're here. God has given us 61 years together, and as long as we are alive, we're going to serve God and serve one another and love one another and forgive one another. We still have these fights, and it's just human nature. But as I said earlier in the program, before we go to bed, we settle it and say, forgive me. Forgiveness is a really important attitude and character. You admit your mistakes. We admit our mistakes and what our fault. And when we say, forgive me, and she says, I forgive you, and I forgive you, darling, and then it's all settled, and you're back into union again.
So then I talked to him, and I said, well, okay, I've done that, Lord. Boy, I'm a good girl. I've done that. And so, but he doesn't love me. He still doesn't love me. And so then the Lord spoke to me again. And he said, you don't try to change him, which I always was trying to do. You don't try to change him. You don't try to save him. In other words, to bring him to the Lord, to save him. I'm the Savior. You are to love him the same way I love you. And I said, but Lord, he doesn't love me at all. How can I do that? And he said, I love you. The Lord said, I love you. I love you enough that it doesn't matter if your husband doesn't love you, because I love you enough. And so whenever you look for love, don't look to him for love. Look to me for love. And I'll feel all the love you need. And so you just love him. And one more thing I might add.
Yes.
Because I didn't emphasize this as much. This dream I had of a happy marriage was so ingrained in me from a young age that it was very, very hard to give it up. And I had to do that because we weren't going to have that marriage. And we don't now. I mean, nobody has a perfect marriage, but it's certainly good now. But giving that up was a big decision. And I had many tears over that, of this dream that I had had, and I wasn't going to achieve it. But what ended up is, I'll tell people too, no, instead of the Prince Charming, I met the King of Kings.
Wow.
And so I'm the King of Kings. So that's better.
Wow. Thanks a
yeah,
lot.
and with Charlie walking with the Lord, it just makes us have a really good marriage. Not perfect, but it's good.
So far we made it.